Hi there and welcome to another video from Hegarty Maths. It's Mr. Hegarty here, and in this video we're talking about factorising simple algebraic expressions, our first video on that topic. Now before we get going, I want you to pause the video and try and expand the following brackets. This is a task and a skill we've previously learnt about. Okay, let's see what we got. Did you get the following? 2x add 4, 3x subtract 6, 5x subtract 20, negative x and take away 2, or negative x and then negative 2, and 21x take away 14. Hopefully you got that, because it's just an application of the distributive law, multiplying both things by 2, by 3, by 5. Here may be the only difficult one. We're multiplying both things by negative 1, aren't we, and here by 7. And the process of going from here to here is called expanding. You expand, and what you're doing is using the distributive law to multiply everything in the bracket by the number in front. Now, this video is all about when you've been given the expanded form and you're trying to go backwards. And going backwards, things that were in expanded form, putting them back into a number multiplied by a bracket is called factorising. So that's what we're trying to do in this video. So I'm going to cover that up now, and I'm going to show you this side. Can you think of a way to factorise, to go from here to what was originally a bracket multiplied by a number? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to look for the highest common factor, and we're going to factorise that out, put that outside the bracket. Now, we look at the numbers first. The highest common factor of 2 and 4 is 2. So we write that there. Then we look here and we just say, right, there's an x, there's no x. So I don't have to worry about algebra here. So time to open up my bracket. What must go here to multiply by 2 to get 2x? Or simply an x. What must go here to multiply by 2 to give me positive 4? It must be positive 2. And just before you launch ahead, times it out in your head. 2 times x, 2x, 2 times positive 2, positive 4, done. Check it by expanding out. Right, here you would look for the highest common factor of 3 and 6, and that is 3. You look at the x and there's no other algebra here, so time to open up the bracket. What goes here to multiply by 3 to get 3x? An x. What goes here to multiply by 3 to get negative 6? Or negative 2. And times it out in your head, indeed you get 3x subtract 6. Next one. You look for the highest common factor of 5 and 20. Well, that's going to be 5. You look at the x and there's no other algebra here, so time to open up your bracket. What goes here to multiply by 5 to get 5x? An x. What goes here to multiply by 5 to get negative 20? Negative 4. Alright? Now this is again where it's slightly difficult. I look at that and I look at negative hidden 1 there and negative 2, and I think, well, I could factor out the highest common factor, negative 1 and negative 2 is actually negative 1. So I'm going to factor out that. What goes here to multiply by negative 1 to get negative 1x? Well, just a positive x will do the trick. And what goes here to multiply by negative 1 to get negative 2? Well, a positive 2, because when you multiply that back out you get exactly this. Now hopefully you're screaming at the screen there and saying you wouldn't write the negative 1. Mathematicians would just write the negative to mean negative 1. And the last one, look at 21 and 14 and think the highest common factor is 7. Open up your brackets. What goes there to multiply by 7 to get 21x? 3x. What goes here to multiply by 7 to get negative 14? Negative 2. Times it out. Double check before you move on that it gives you the answer, and it does. And look, if I delete that, look how we got the same answers as when we were expanding. So that's what we're doing in this video. Let's go through it. Each time pause and have a go yourself. Pause the video. So the highest common factor of 2 and 4 is 2. There's an x and no other algebra, so time to open up the bracket. What goes here? An x. What goes here? So multiply by 2 to get positive 4, positive 2. Times it out in your head. Yep, yep, and you're done. Just a common mistake before we go on. Common mistake, and this happens loads. Students do this because they're rushing. If they're doing 2x add 4, they look at the highest common factor of 2 and 4 and they say, yeah, it's 2. And then they say, what goes here? X. And they just forget and they just write plus 4 there because they just see that and they just copy what they see. If they took 1 second before they went on and times that out and realized it times out to 2x add 8 and that's not what they started with, they know they made a mistake. So just avoid this common mistake by timesing out at the end. Pause the video, have a go. Now, I put this one in on purpose because here's another classic mistake. Students look at 12 and 20 and they go, well, I know 2 goes into it. So they take out a 2 and they will write what goes here, 6x, what goes here to make positive 20, positive 10. Now, although if you multiply that out, that does give you what you're looking for, okay, so you might think, what's wrong with that? They didn't factorize out the highest common factor of 12 and 20. Yeah, 2 is a factor of 12 and 20, but when you're asked to factorize, you always have to factorize out the highest common factor. So they should have just taken a second in their head and thought to themselves, what is the HCF of 12 and 20? Oh, it's 4. So they should have just factorized out a 4, and then they would have said, right, 4 times what gives me 12x? 3x. 4 times what gives me positive 20? Positive 5. Times it out, it does give you what you're looking for, but that is the proper answer, not the one I showed you before with the 2. Pause the video, have a go at this. It's the same as before, but there's a takeaway there. The highest common factor of 5 and 10 is 5. X, and there's no more algebra, so open up the brackets. 5 times what gives me 5x? Well, simply an x. 5 times what gives me negative 10? Negative 2. Times it out before you go on, and you know you're done. Next one, pause, have a go. The highest common factor of 15 and 10, well, that's going to be 5. A, and there's no other algebra here, so it's time to open up those brackets. 5 times what gives me 15a? 3a. 5 times what gives me negative 10? Negative 2. Times it out in your head. Yep, yep, and you're done. Okay, next one. Pause and have a go. Right, this one's a tiny bit more tricky. There's a negative there. What's the highest common factor of negative 14 and negative 21? Well, 7 goes into 14 and 21, so it's definitely 7. But because there's a negative factor here, negative and a negative, I can factorize out negative 7. It's just slightly easier like that. There's an a and no other algebra, so open up the bracket. Negative 7 times what gives me negative 14a? Positive 2a. Alright, just check that makes sense to you. Negative 7 times what gives me negative 21? Positive 3. Okay, and that would be the answer. Now, I suppose it would be allowed if you had just taken out the 7 and written in the brackets there. If I had taken out the 7, I would have had negative 2a, negative 3. If I hadn't have taken out the negative with it. So that, I suppose, is allowed, but it's just neater to take out the negative factor and the 7 because that's just more helpful to keep this bracket nice and tidy. Alright? Right, pause the video, have a go at that one. Well, really, there's a negative 1 there, isn't there? So when we're factorizing out, the only thing that divides into negative 1 and negative 4, well, that's just negative 1. Open up your bracket. Negative 1 times what gives me negative y? Well, that would be positive y, wouldn't it? Negative 1 times what gives me negative 4? Positive 4. And hopefully you're shouting at the screen and saying, we don't write negative 1, we just write that as negative y add 4. Okay? And last one for you, pause the video, have a go. Right, we look at 10 and we look at 2, and the highest common factor of those is indeed 2. And there's no algebra here and just a y here, so we're ready to open up our bracket. 2 times what gives me 10? Well, it must be 5. 2 times what gives me negative 2y? It must be negative y. And times it out, 2 times 5, 10. 2 times negative y is negative 2y. And that's it, we're done for this video. Thanks for watching.